All right, we're here. We're going to get things started. Sheena, welcome to my humble little coffee and contracts chat. Tell the world who you are and what you do, please.
Yeah, of course. I'm so excited to be here. I have my coffee. I'm all cozy. It's raining. This is perfect. I'm in the mood. My name's Sheena Ferrari, and I've been firmly in legal operations for the last 18 years or so. Started as a paralegal in law firms at McDermott, did some time at Townsend and Crew, went over to McDermott, Will and Emery, and Goodwin. So I did those three law firms, and then I went in-house and I worked at Gilead Sciences. That was my first in-house gig. Ran their kind of litigation operations over there.
Okay.
So the legal operations title wasn't really around back then, but all paralegals and non-attorneys were doing operations, and the attorneys, of course. We were all doing operations. We were all setting up functions. And I loved it. So I went from Gilead to SurveyMonkey, where I did my first proper legal operations job. Was in a small team over there. Absolutely loved the SurveyMonkey. That was my first time that I implemented a CLM and worked with the sales team. So we can talk a little bit more about that. That was the beginning of my CLM journey a long time ago. And I implemented Conga back then. It was the only one that integrated with Salesforce at the time. So very, very cool stuff at the beginning of all of that. And then I went over to Fitbit, and most recently I've been at a company called Vercel. Forgot Snapchat. I got to spend some time at Snapchat as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, implemented their CLM there too, implemented the CLM at Fitbit. And then I just implemented a CLM at Vercel, which is late stage start.
Amazing. You might be the record holder for people I've chatted with. We're tracking a couple of different records when it comes to CLM. One is like, what is the longest implementation? There's a couple in the running for that.
Yeah.
How many CLM systems at the same job? That's another a little track record, right? And now I think you might have just that number of done, right? So okay. Where do we even start? I mean, we're going to start, maybe we'll start at just the end. I mean, you've done already so many, you've done under the belt. First of all, how many different systems? You mentioned one, by the way, unsponsored, nobody gets paid for anything. Feel free to mention, not mentioning, I don't care. But how many different systems were in those past 4 or 5 years?
Gosh, I've implemented 3, but I've managed about 5 different systems that are in the market because they were like vendors or things I was consolidating, things like that.
Okay, great. Okay, so which I'm dying to already go to the whole like managed because hey, guess what everybody forgets? Post go live. That's when the real work actually starts, and all hell can break loose. And people seem to kind of not plan for that at all during the implementation because implementations can be painful as well. But I'm not going to lead the witness. I want you to tell us whatever favorite war stories you have. Let's go with lessons learned. So let's start at the end with like, what have you learned? What can you share?
Totally. So, okay. I think that there's a lot of lessons I've learned over the year and a lot of pattern matching that I've done with like how these tools work. I think one of the things is that not all of the CLMs fit different companies for different reasons. So even if you've had success in the past, you still have to go. When I say, oh, I've used Ironclad at a couple companies, that's not me saying. I had a team of people, of really great people, cross-functional, that chose that based on an RFP that I created. So it's usually, I like to get people in often and early, which was a lesson learned. You don't want to build at Snap, or let's say at early days when I was doing Conga, it became really apparent to me that I was building out a system that was for multiple teams. And back then it was fairly novel to have like security and finance all in one system. And so I worked almost solely with the sales team. And then found out pretty quickly that finance really needed to be involved. So I think that just bringing people along for the ride is something that I learned early on, and have always done it ever since. And that has driven adoption like crazy. Although conversely to that, at Snapchat, for example, everyone was too busy and they just wanted me to do it themselves. So I think just like a lot of what I've learned is a lot of like listening, upfront discussions. The other thing more technical that I've learned is that a lot of people, you have to design your preference for a parallel approach or a staggered implementation approach.
Okay.
I usually try to do it in multiple work streams, which creates a little bit more resource need. So right up front, I'm very clear that I'll be doing a migration work stream, a design and engineering work stream, and an integration work stream. So those two work streams always go in parallel. When I did this in the early days, I did them kind of one after the other. And it took a long time. And so if you can design it and get teams on each of those, whether it's your implementation vendor or engineers, and kind of work those through and design them through, that's usually my preference.
So let's break that down a little bit, because as we hear and we see, in-house teams of all shapes and sizes. So there's the ones that have the resources and teams, like you're mentioning. They have great IT support. They have like the big kind of more enterprisey feeling of like, we're doing a big, tech thing. That's one. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we've got, tiny law departments that are over functioning. They're probably too small for the size of the company. And they're, of course, struggling with contracting. And for them, resources are just, they're nowhere to be found. They're scraping together pennies either to get, bring somebody like us in, or they're trying to do it themselves. And there's no one right way. But migration, you mentioned, we're going to set aside integration, because that integration is so tech heavy that you need your IT team. I mean, without them, you actually can't do it. Right?
Most of the tools that's changing right now with everything in the market.
Absolutely. If we go and we can't even, we have no definition for the market. We're going crazy. We're finalizing our annual market study, and we're like, what do we do about the definition section? And honestly, we duked it out internally too, because there is actually no answer. So we can debate it, till we're purple. But you're right. Like the older, I don't want to say heavier, but like the end-to-end full workflow systems, if you're going to integrate that, that's a pretty big tech lift. It is not a plug and play. It's not a, okay, so that's one thing. But migration, we lawyers understand migrating documents, right? We can understand, I have a whole bunch of contracts. I need to move all that bunch of contracts somewhere else. But can we be realistic about, are all those contracts already in one place? No. Taxonomy, naming convention doesn't exist. Some stuff still on people's C drives. You know who you are, but it's true. So we found, and tell me kind of in your experience, if you have to do it sequentially, because you just physically can't stretch the budget and the people, what would be your approach? And we've got some thoughts of just like doing a hard cutoff of dates. We're just like, you know what? We're not going to look at anything before a certain date, or we're going to start going forward net nil in the system. And then over time, we'll figure out how to migrate. But have you had some different experiences that were like some good things that worked well when you had to migrate later?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, because that kind of is a give and take between, like, most of the time when I put in these systems, the main urge is to have everything together, so that we can report on it. And like, I feel like that's the ROI that everyone's looking for. So I usually try and prioritize it to the extent I can. But if I always do a phased migration approach, because you're going to have like a delta that you're working with. And I love the idea of a date delimiter. I think I've definitely done that in the past, where you're like, wait, we just need our contracts. We don't need our sales contracts. They're done. They're in Salesforce. Maybe we just need like highly negotiated contracts for the last 5 years. That can cut down your migration a lot. I would say when I'm doing these 3 parallel paths, it's not necessarily heavily resourced in the sense that there's a lot of people behind it. The good news is with a lot of these CLMs, we just did a migration in-house of like 5,000 contracts, in-house, because we were able to bulk upload. I think the hardest part is the part you talked about, Lucy, which is understanding what data do you want to pull from your contracts when you migrate them, like getting everyone together on the policy and the taxonomy and the naming conventions, and even the policy about what contracts that you want to migrate. I think that's the hard part.
Policy, such a good word. It's a big word, and we use it all the time, and we know it overwhelms and scares some people. We're like, we don't mean policy like corporate policy. You can go that far, but really we just need some decisions. Is that kind of a better way? Like, can we call it a written decision? Right? Who's a part of these decisions? Who should be involved in contracting policy decisions?
Gosh, in the corporations that I've worked for, it's usually our head of commercial and someone in sales, someone high up in sales, especially when it comes to like review thresholds and things like that. But when it comes to migration, I usually just make sure that my commercial and finance teams are very comfortable with what we're migrating, because they're the ones that are digging in and really going through kind of the contract universe.
Yeah. Okay, so perfect. I mean, again, what I'm hearing is policy doesn't mean you're like bringing down the hammer and legal's in charge. It's a business process. I mean, again, that's another like a baiting question. We're like, who should own contracting? And there's not one right answer, but I'm going to venture to say it doesn't need to be legal, guys. Why are we like somehow these default owners? Do you think it's because we just always feel like, well, somebody's got to do it, and it's a contract, and we're always kind of involved? It just feels like we end up doing it, but I don't think it's an intentional plan. What's been your experience? You've had a couple of kind of back-to-back ownership.
It's so interesting because when I was at Zendesk, the ownership of contracts was like very, very strictly bifurcated between procurement and sales. So the procurement team had their own attorneys, their own, they wrote their own policies, they did their own playbooks.
Okay.
And legal
inside of procurement. Mm-hmm. And legal was okay. I mean, the legal team was like, yes, we understand this.
All they did was advise at a high level on the playbook. So it was really interesting. And it was the same way at Blue Shield of California, where procurement actually had a legal team within, and then they just did their own thing. So when it came to commercial legal, it was mostly focused on, it was all focused on sales. The procurement was completely separate. So I've seen it done a couple different ways. And when I think about contract owners, it was different for me when I joined Zendesk, because I thought, wait, I don't own contracts. Like, where's our CLM? And they were like, we have Salesforce. We do everything through there. We even DocuSign through there. And we have, they had a couple other systems. That was the one that had a few. And then they had, their own. So it was interesting. So Okay. And then the procurement team actually used their own procurement tool to negotiate contracts. So they had a different type of, CLM or procurement process tool.
Okay. So, the moral of the story is always there is not one right answer. There is no copy and paste. There is no plug and play. All the systems have different pluses and minuses and pros and cons. Some are better at certain industries. Some are better at buy side. Some are better at sales side. And I think that's what makes so much confusion right now in the market. Obviously, then, God, there's so many. I have so many questions for you. But let's talk about the obvious. And every chat, I wonder how long it takes before one of us says AI. And half the time, I break my own little content.
You're doing good. We did 13 minutes. AI.
Thank you, lucky 13. I feel like I'm always around this mark too when it's me. I'm like, wait, how can my guest have not brought it up yet? But it really is I always kind of say like it just kind of slapped CLM in the face. I mean, it feels like it just stormed the Capitol and said things are going to be different now, and we're all still figuring out how different. But tell me what it changed for you, or what was your latest experience with it in your current home?
Yeah, it's interesting watching some of the CLMs that were AI based to begin with kind of now take a little bit more interest of the consumer market, and then others that maybe weren't so AI based or maybe intake based, really try and catch up on the AI front. I think we're going to see a definite rise in like post-signature AI tooling. We have seen in the market before, right? There are a couple people that have done that in the market. And it'll be interesting. Right now I see a lot of great AI companies in the redlining and post-signature insights space spinning up. Intake to template space is going to be interesting as like open source companies come around, like Bond Terms and Term Scout. And I'm so curious to see if that, because I think, that because I always think of, the chunks of CLM as the chunks.
Agreed. We call them buckets, chunks, phases of the life cycle. But it has to be broken down that way. Just please, for the people. You cannot try to solve the contracting problem with that, right? You have to like figure out what is the specific pain point. But I will set my public service aside. Please, go ahead. Sorry, you were saying the chunks.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's exactly right. The chunks that I see are kind of like intake to template, and then negotiation, and then post-signature data extraction, right? Like those are the main 3 chunks that I usually spend all my time in. And I think that the latter 2 are the one that we're going to see a lot of AI in. I'm super curious to see what that intake's going to look like. I'm seeing a lot of reverse AI, which is you put in your contracts and then it takes out the data for you, so we don't have to fill out forms anymore, which will be really cool. And I'm still trying to figure out where to put my playbooks and like get a first pass red line. I know that people have been talking about that like crazy, but I'm still trying to get that together, whether it's better, good enough playbooks in house.
That's the thing.
I know.
I think that it's happening from a technical perspective. There's a capability to create a playbook. The problem is that we're seeing it's just not good enough. It's not accurate. It's not clean. It's not making sense. Then you kind of lose that credibility with the lawyers, and they're like, I can't rely on it. Even the most forward-thinking attorneys are like, yes, let's go. And there's this like immediate disappointment, and it's really not the fault of the tech. The tech is where it is. It is going to get smarter, faster, and better. But I think you're right. That's obviously where there's a lot of focus right now. Certainly, a lot of VC money is flowing into these different technologies, which I have mixed feelings about. It causes some kind of bad behaviors in some ways, and the customers are so confused, and it's a bit of a frenzied market. What would be your advice? And we deal with this with every conversation we have, is like, how do we help people future-proof whatever their choice is today? So if they're picking some sort of technology, how do they think about what it might look like even in a year? I mean, we're watching the crazy acquisitions, partnerships, divestitures, bankruptcies. I mean, it's all happening. How do you future-proof it? Like, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think gone are the days where we spend a year implementing and spend 5 years with a tool.
Yes.
I think, and my advice would be to get those underlying, if you get the underlying documentation and you keep it updated, you can stay agile within tools, because these tools are going to become easier and easier to give. If you stick in your playbook to a GPT, into ChatGPT, you can get a GPT very quickly. Let's say GPT syncs in a year, and GCAI is like, everyone needs to use it. It's the best. They've broken the code. Like, you have your underlying documentation and you can pop it back into that tool and utilize that tool. So again, if you just stay very, very focused on the underlying documentation, I think that you'll be able to stay agile throughout.
I'm hearing readiness. I mean, that's the boring word for what you're saying. You're spot on. Documentation, process, map the process, know how things flow, and then in that map, I would say link to that documentation. And by documentation, let's throw out a few examples. Obviously, playbooks, templates, right? Is it
threshold configurations? Like, what are your prompts? Like, I have a prompt library now, that if I can move prompts across LLMs, and I don't need, if one gets deprecated by my company tomorrow, I can go put my prompt in another one, so being
amazing. So you're talking about general LLMs that you're using, that not the free versions, your enterprise licensed internal general LLMs, and you're saying you use that for some stuff. So you're outside of that CLM tech stack at this point. You're just saying, hey, use what you got. What are you using it for today?
I think we're using like GPTs for sales diligence. We're using GPTs. We're trying to get a GPT up for like M&A review. And so we're kind of just creating, we did a LLM comparison where we put in the same prompts, and even tried to create the same like contract templates over 3 LLMs, and did a comparison about how that went. And now that helped us understand like future proofing, like where we feel comfortable, knowing that that's going to shift, obviously. But continuing to test those LLMs across like similar prompts over time is something that I've found helpful too. It's so fun to try and figure out how these are changing, but at the same time, like the only way, and I keep telling my entire team and all my attorneys that like we have to keep like we use Notion, right? We have to keep our underlying Notion databases in order to use any AI. It's like, what's the problem? Where's the documentation? Then call Sheena to help you set something up. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I mean, that underlying documentation part, it's so hard to get people to pay attention to that. I mean, they really get excited about the tech.
Yeah.
And then you have to go backwards to say, I think sometimes they even figure it out really kind of late. They're like in implementation, they get the first big spreadsheet from whatever system provider they picked to fill in, because they want to just boop, 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 configure and get you going and say implemented live, goodbye. You know, like these are SaaS companies and they're built on that revenue model. You know, they need to sell the deal, they need to implement the thing, and they need to be out. That's fine. That is what it is, but it's not actually useful for most in-house teams. They're just not ready for it. That's what we found that. I mean, we found that before AI, right? This was like for years we're beating this drum. I'm like, you've got to get ready, or you are going to have inevitable disappointment.
It's the same. So I think it's just, it's different technology, same underlying need of being organized.
Being organized and knowing things, like knowing things, but like you said, the thresholds, it's amazing how many law departments we talk to, and well, you know, we pretty much review every contract. Why? And there isn't really an answer, which is okay. And it takes that kind of precision questioning, kind of almost therapy conversation to say, you don't have to. No, I know, we know, we just haven't really taken the time to kind of stop and think about it.
That's great.
That's okay. That's okay, because now, you know, now's the time. But it feels like that really core foundational step. It kind of directs everything else. But for us, we've always, that's our you know, our approach, our methodology is always like, we need to understand your review thresholds, policy, whatever you want to call it. What comes to legal and why? And is it the right stuff? And inevitably, of course, NDA, great example. Really? Tell me what you did with NDAs. Give me some of your favorite stories of how you solved the NDA nonsense.
I know this is very controversial, but I'm dying to understand like why I've seen so many people spend so many hours on this document over the course of my career. And maybe there is like, I need a good example of like a horror story, because I feel like I've never heard one like, we really wish we had that NDA. Like, so what we've done, a couple things, is that Snapchat, my GC, was very supportive of like risk tolerance around NDAs. And so the sales team was able to sign any NDA as long as it didn't have like 3 things in it, like IP. Like he gave us like 3 things, like you sign it, you're in trouble. There wasn't even like a system. It was just like honor system, heavily trained the AEs, look for these words, you know, these are the words that will like put us in the most risk. And eventually we did have a configured, like, you know, give them some bumper bowling lanes technology wise, so they didn't have to remember. But yeah, so that was an interesting approach I saw. At Vercel, we use a open source NDA. We use one NDA. And so that's been interesting too, just like making sure that we stay as neutral as possible, and hopefully less time on them because of that. And that has worked, I think. Still waiting.
Well, that's the key. That's what it all goes down to, right? It's, can you please just create a piece of paper that is actually acceptable to the other side and still protects you? And I think getting us out of the whole has to be perfect and on our side and all that. So and I think what you started with really is, I think it was the general counsel at Snap you mentioned, had this risk tolerance approach, smart risk taking approach is what it sounds like. It was a very pragmatic approach that said, look, we don't need to review every NDA. And I think it has to come from the top down.
That's right.
So what you gave is a really good example of a GC who is pragmatic, business minded, clearly, and knows how to take smart risk.
But still smart risk. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing with lawyering. Whenever I bring this up, and I'm happy to take smart risks, happy to take risks, and just getting deals done, and the immediate answer from all my colleagues and counterparts was, well, but Lucy, you know. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Look, that is an easy game to play. You know what could happen? Yes, it could. And to your point, give me a nightmare story. And they're out there. Let's preempt all the chatter that's going to be like, wow, Lucy and Sheena are crazy because this thing happened. Yes, it happened. How many times? Count how many times those nightmares happen. There's a cost for that nightmare, and you have to assume that cost, and you're going to save, though, so much time. And nobody's saying throw caution to the wind. Again, that's the other thing. Everybody has to start with like, of course, we want to make sure we mitigate risks. Well, of course you do. That's your job. Lawyers, like, that is our job. Can we just not have to repeat that? I don't know. I hate the whole, like, we have to disclaim. Of course, we're still here to protect the business, but I'd like to not have to review every NDA. Yeah. Yes. Like,
Absolutely.
welcome to modern contracting.
Yeah.
So risk tolerance, top down, clearly. You clearly also need to have a C-suite, right? That's going to really entrust the GC, the CLO, to take the risks. And at the end of the day, isn't it the CFO, the CEO that also have to be completely aligned with the CLO? It's not just the legal decision.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure like that was run up the chain too. So, and it's a little bit different, and it's interesting. I think advertising businesses are a little different too. So, but yeah, absolutely. I think top down, it usually comes from more like senior seasoned kind of like leadership. I've noticed too, those types of policy decisions, or guidelines. And so, yeah, I think with NDAs, those have been the most interesting. I mean, my goal is always just to do less of them. I mean, it's always the lowest hanging fruit of any of my new roles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And starting there and showing wins is a really great thing to do. Sounds super unsexy again, but get rid of that noise, and the business will love you.
That's right.
We're here to enable the business. Can we all please just
remember
that?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we have a couple of minutes left, which again, there's like 5 more hours of questions and topics that I want us to cover, all related to this wonderful topic of contracting. But you mentioned earlier in our conversation ROI. You kind of mentioned it, and I plugged it, and I put a pin in it. But I want to come back to it for a sec. There's a lot of data, kind of from like the World CC, commercial contracting community, about revenue left on the table, unrealized savings, and really that financial aspect of the benefits of CLM technologies. Great. What's the ROI to the legal leadership, and how do you make the case when the GC's lukewarm on tech? Have you had to battle that?
Yeah, I have, absolutely. Trying to so at a company I was at, we had 4 CLMs. They were across, a couple different teams. The impact of that was a lot of downstream administrative work. The finance team was strapped like Frankensteining together contracts across 4 systems. And so that's the legal team was having trouble understanding the business relationships across 4 systems. And it became super hard. I mean, we were filing things in 4 systems. We were having to do government reporting like in weird ways, and was making people uncomfortable because everything was fragmented. And so in that case, I did have to kind of try and articulate business cases, or something I do all the time for these things. My win on business case is always as much compliance as I can, like hang out with your security team, like discuss why you need this for SOX compliance and things like that. Those are really helpful. But for the legal team, it's usually human ROI. A lot of the times it's time. So at a past company, they were very interested in like a total spend. And so I had to take a blended rate of attorney time and actually show, and I had to do qualitative use cases. So I said, I'm the VP of legal. I spend 6 hours a month, like looking for contracts across 4 systems, and I had them tell their story. Right. And that was part of my pitch deck as well.
I love that. I think that's an important part. This is not a super easy, pure dollar ROI story. So I think compliance is one that certainly speaks to legal leadership, but time savings is another one. I went through the same exercise. We had a spreadsheet, as in house at Microsoft. We counted 43 legal professionals that were touching procurement contracts. That's how it all started. So we're like, we can't. We have got to centralize. We've got to standardize. We've got to outsource. We've got to automate. I mean, that's kind of the sequence we always recommend. And it was time savings. It was exactly what you did. It was the same exercise. I had to interview these people. They filled out a survey, approximately how much of your time, blended rate, like the senior level blended rate, and you have to talk to HR and understand the numbers. But it is real. It's a little bit, you have to be creative on how to present it, but you're not making stuff up. If people are spending hours a week searching, that's a problem.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
I mean, we're at time. I just have super strong feelings. I can go on another hour, but I'm gonna stop us. We're at time, and I'm gonna have to bring you back, and we're gonna do part 2. We'll continue. Sheena, any closing thoughts, and then we will let you go on with your day.
No, thanks for having me, and good luck in all your CLM adventures. And ping me offline if you have any questions.
I love it. Everybody connect with Sheena, connect with us, follow us for resources. Oh, and we're going to have a super cool new thing to announce, a workshop for picking systems. I know my team's going to kill me. I'm not sure I'm going to say it out loud yet, but we're going to tell the world soon enough because we know everybody needs help picking and it's just overwhelming. So more to come on that. Happy weekend. Happy Friday. Thank you, Sheena. More to come.
Thank you.